Tim Harris Jr. is a really good guy. Before I go into his coaching acumen, this is the kind of person that anybody can relate to. And I urge anybody that's a Noles fan, a booster, somebody runs into him in any way, shape, or form, airport, say hi. Good person. He's the kind of guy that represents whoever he's with in a good manner. He went to the University of Miami, was an elite track athlete. He still holds the 800, I believe, record at the University of Miami. So obviously Tim could run. He is also the son, obviously, as his name is Tim Harris Jr., of Tim Harris. We call him Ice Harris, Booker T. Washington head coach, won multiple state championships down there. Tim Jr. was a part of that program, and he was the head coach for 1 year. And then he went into the coaching profession at the college level. But he grew up in Dade. Remember that. We're going to come back to that here in a minute because it's going to be very important with recruiting. And he spent 6 years at Booker T as offense coordinator, running back coach, quarterback coach, and then in 2014, the head coach. 2015 to 2020, he was at Florida International as the running back coach. In that season, they went from the year before, like 1,300 yards rushing to almost 1,800 yards the first season he was there. So you get an idea what he's capable of. 2021, he became the offensive coordinator in addition to being the running back coach. And then UCF hired him in 2021 with Gus. Now, he had some pretty good running backs, and I'll go over them in a second, but he was there as the co-OC and running back coach. And I think that's an important part. He's going to understand Gus's mind and give him some different ideas. Hey, when we did this with this player, blah, blah, blah. And there's several different players at Florida State right now, as I'm going to go into, that fit what they did as receivers and running backs. And that's important. They're going to be able to go back and forth and play ping pong on ideas. That's going to help. So 2019, just as an example, then I'll go into the 2022 and 24 seasons, et cetera, at UCF. But FIU, they get some pretty good players, but I didn't expect to see these kind of numbers. 2019 at Florida International, Anthony Jones, a 5'11", 215-pound kid. That's a running back that's similar to like Cam Davis, for instance. 867 yards, 9 touchdowns, 4.6 yards per carry. The backup, Napoleon Maxwell, very similar, 6 foot, 215, 675 yards, 5.3 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. At UCF in 2022, again, he was co-OC running back coach for part of the time that he was there. You're talking about a guy that was a part of a really unique running back room, and they had John Rice Plumlee, one of the best guys in the country at quarterback. But Plumlee had 862 yards and 11 scores. Isaiah Bowser was their banger, the bruiser in the middle. He had 799 yards and 16 touchdowns. Red zone and short yardage, they didn't mess around. Bowser was really, really good. He only averaged 3.9 yards a carry because he did so many short yardage carries, but they were consistent with it. And then they had R.J. Harvey, the guy that just went nuts this past year. That was the first year he kind of broke on the scene. 796 yards, 6.7 yards per carry, 5 scores. That is one of the best combinations of run-pass opportunities that I've seen because they had Baker, they had Hudson, they had some other guys. They were pretty darn good on offense. Also, Ryan O'Keefe, this is something to bring up and why I keep talking about running backs and receivers. Tim was a running back coach for most of his time at UCF, but he also was instructive and influential with the receivers. And part of what Gus does in his offense, his slot or his outside receiver will get reverses or they'll use jet sweeps and fakes. As an example, 2022, Ryan O'Keefe, he's a really speedy guy out of Texas, 23 carries, 222 yards, so almost 10 yards a carry. He didn't score, but when you can do that, you're holding the linebackers and the defensive ends and making them hesitate and making them think. When you do that, it gains a very big advantage for your offense. You're playing fast, they're playing slow. Always an edge. Thomas Castellanos, by the way, in 2022, he didn't play a ton at UCF, but 14 carries, 120 yards, 8.57 yards per carry, and a score. So they find different ways for the quarterback, the running backs, no matter what their scheme or style is that they came from, to be really good. And by the way, Bowser and Harvey were transfers. Bowser came from Northwestern. Harvey came from Virginia. So Gus is very accustomed to it. And so is Tim, bringing in transfers and getting them to be very, very productive. 2024, just as an example with the receivers, Kobe Hudson had 47 catches, 770 yards, 16.4 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns. And Randy Pittman, a guy that I brought up on the Thursday show, he's a kid that was originally committed to Florida State. Remember that now. That's a young man that's an H-back, 6'1", 6'2", 230-some pounds, athletic. He had 32 catches, 416 yards, 13 yards per catch, 2 scores. His name's been bandied about with Florida State. I don't know if they're deeply involved with him, but he's a Panama City kid. He went to Mosley. I'd imagine that he's a pretty good bet to be involved with Florida State, but Marcus and Douglas is a possibility, and there's a kid named Jaden Platt. I need to learn more about him, but he's a kid that was at A&M, hasn't done much, only had like 27 snaps this year. He's supposedly going to visit Florida State next week, and they already got Marcus and Douglas. So are they done at tight end? Are they going to take 2 or 3? How many are they going to do? I think it's minimum 2, but don't forget about Randy Pittman. He's a possibility. 2023, the one year that he went back to his alma mater, talking about Tim Harris Jr. here, Miami's rushing totals comparably are insane. 2022, they had 1,540 yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground. The next season, when Tim got there, 2,251 yards and 24 touchdowns. Now, the talent improved. I'm not debating that. But, I mean, they doubled their touchdowns. You can say it however you like. That's still double the production. That's impressive. As for Tim in recruiting, and this is where it gets just testimonial, I know Tim from seeing him on the recruiting trail, covering him at UCF, and again, great guy. You ever get a chance to say hi to him, highly advise it. He's the kind of guy you want to talk to about because he's A to B. You ask Tim a question, Tim Harris Jr. will give you an answer. A to B. I love that. Whether it's a coaching tip I asked him about, whether it was a player, what he thought about this guy's coming up, guys at UCF, whatever it was, he didn't care. Saw him on the recruiting trail at like Edgewater High School, IMG, South Florida. Saw him all over the state of Florida, wherever I was at a big game. There's a good chance Tim was there. He likes recruiting. He relates to young people. And again, as I noted when I first began this part of the show, Tim Harris is a Dade County guy. He went to the University of Miami. He's coached at FIU. He understands the landscape of South Florida. There is hardly anybody down there that doesn't know him and probably know his father even better. Ice Harris is one of the most historic coaches in South Florida history. Competitive guy, really good dude, but he gets after it. Tim's a little more mild-mannered as junior. Senior is definitely more in-your-face old school, but he got it done at that program, and his son's benefited. He came up that way too. So I think that's good. He's got all kinds of guys that he can bounce ideas off of in South Florida. That's going to help him at Florida State. And it's probably going to help the Noles get guys to Tallahassee. This is a common theme on the Locked On Podcast Network, talking about recruiting. And the Locked On Seminoles, in general, we talk about it constantly. But if you're Florida State, what is the historic balance of this? When the Noles beat Miami for South Florida recruits, they beat Miami on the gridiron a lot more often. That's your rival. You need to beat them. Tim's going to help you get like 1 to 2 more guys a year, in my opinion, just from knowing him, seeing his recruitments, and now having the Florida State logo on his polo when he walks into a high school coach's office. That's important. Florida State's going to be more, let's say, attractive to recruits because head coaches down in South Florida, parents, 7-on coaches, everybody down there, trainers, they know who Tim is. And he's, again, a very likable guy. That's going to benefit the Noles. If Florida State can, I don't see how this wouldn't happen, but if they can combine him, Sertan, and just anybody else that has ties to South Florida from the staff in any way, and they just coordinate it. I mean, Gus has got experience there. The new DB coach from Nebraska does. He's a South Florida guy. He played in the public league. This is a great scenario for Florida State because if nothing else, you should be able to get your roster balanced by this time next year when they're in the portal in 2025, looking forward to the 2026 season. You'll have more of a presence from South Florida from the portal, possibly a junior college player. You never know. In the prep ranks, you'll see a lot more kids coming through. I'm going to mention this podcast numerous times. And again, I'm going to cut this out. As I noted earlier in the show when I did the full show, this is going to be its own little show later on. This is something you should come back and look at in 6 months. Florida State's going to get some kids on campus you might be surprised at, but I won't be. Tim will be involved in that. He's a good recruiter. He's a good guy. He's a good evaluator. And he knows South Florida. Very vital to Florida State's history. Bobby Bowden certainly benefited from it. He's got a couple rings because of what he was able to do with South Florida recruiting. Tim Harris is no fool. He's going to try to do that as well. That's going to lock it up for this edition of Locked On Seminoles. I appreciate everybody coming in today and always making this your first listen. Check me out anywhere you want on the internet, but most notably, I'm on X, FBScout_Florida. You're going to see a lot of portal news for the Noles and other schools. And also make sure you hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to this pod. Truly appreciate it. Everybody have a good one. I will see you again on Saturday.